Now that we understand how Drax got to where he is, let's begin Annihilation. We are 7 days before Annihilation Day at the edge of the universe, with Thanos. He looks over the cosmos laid out in front of him, pondering his next plan, when a young child approaches him. "So you've arrived, Mistress Death." "I'm here to bear witness." "I feel it." "Of course you do." "Something comes." "Yes, something wonderful."
"Death."
"I'm with him." "Yes."
"And?"
"Learn from this one, Thanos. This one knows me intimately." And with that, Mistress Death vanished, leaving Thanos there to think about this.
Something wonderful.
And this, on Annihilation Day, it all began. Over in the Crunch Energy Cascade on the Kylan moons, the end of the universe began as they came and they attacked in full stride. Giant bug-like creatures swarming into the area, devouring and destroying everything that they could. 7 days after the initial wave struck, destroying the outermost limits of known space. On the planet of Xandar, home of the Nova Corps, Richard Rider just arrived back at base, ready to be debriefed and take a little R&R. But the station was suddenly placed into lockdown. Elsewhere, on the floating space station, Drax the Destroyer is moving throughout it with a little girl named Cammy at his side. The World Mind has detected the approaching presence of the Annihilation Wave and has sent up a fleet to destroy it or steer it away from the star systems under the Nova Corps' jurisdiction. Drax sees the Nova Corps preparing for a large fight and he tells Cammy, "We're leaving." And he grabs her by the shirt and he breaks through the droid guarding them and he makes for the escape route. That's when the Nova Corps realizes their mistake as the wave smashes through them, destroying the fleet piece by piece. Alarms sound across the entire base as the rest of the Nova Corps is called in as the perimeter is broken. Explosions go off in space looking like beautiful fireworks, but they are in fact signaling the death of thousands of brave Nova Corps members. Under the horrific sight, Drax runs to an escape pod where he throws Cammy in and he hits the button. They launch into space and they watch as the wave is blasting and crushing the souls of an entire corps of peacekeepers. As they fall to Xandar, they see the station that they were just on being devoured. Meanwhile, down on the planet, Richard and the Corps are holding back the wave to the best of their ability, but the entire wave has sliced through the fleet like they were nothing, and they are now focused on devouring the entire planet. Giant pods land as the shields are broken, and the insects begin to crawl on the surface of the planet, firing lasers, taking out each and every Corps member in their path. The bravest souls in the galaxy begin to panic as their weapons aren't working until they're split from ear to ear. Richard realizes that there is no stopping this. They are mindless drones willing to kill themselves to eat one corpsman. As Richard turns to the squad with them, telling them to follow him, they decide that they need random patterns to throw off the drones, and it appears to be working until Richard and his friend Samaya see a blazing fireball falling from the skies. Richard looks up asking, "What is that?" And Samaya tells him that it's the spaceport. It's burning and falling to the planet. They both realize that they can't get around it. This is the end. They are going to die. But Richard tells her they have one chance. They're going through the middle. He grabs her and he rockets straight into the fireball. A suicide attempt at saving them seems to be paying off, and Samaya turns to him. "I would like to point out that if you pull this off, I'm going to mate with you for life." Then she smiles at him, and as he looks back, a piece of the ship clips Samaya. She falls, and the blood is splattered onto Richard's face. At that moment, a beam hits him as well, and with the fire and wreckage burning around him, Richard is pinned into the wreckage of the spaceport as it hits the ground with the force of a planet. Then through the darkness, Richard pushes the beam aside, and he crawls out of the wreckage, hoping beyond hope that it's over. He climbs to the top of it to see around him. All of Xandar's destroyed. He pulls off his helmet and he falls to his knees with tears mixing in with his own blood. And then he puts his face into his hands. "I was there. I'm the last of the Nova Corps, and I was there the day that they fell." The next day, with the snow falling around him, Richard woke up to a voice in his head calling out to him, and him responding with a question. "If I'm the only Nova alive, who's talking to me?" "I am the Xandarian World Mind, and as the last Nova, I need you to get me off of this planet. I need your help, Richard Rider. At the present state of decay, I will suffer system death in less than 2 hours, and at that time the entire collective database of the Xandarian culture will be lost. So everyone's dead and you're telling me that I can still save the supercomputer?" "Yes." "Unbelievable, your priorities. Nova Corps Priority 1. Defend the Xandarian civilization. Priority 2, protect and maintain the Xandarian world mind." "Well, you can shove it." "Richard, this is important. Shut up. It is critical. It is critical that you shut up." Richard walks until he sees the remains of the wave, and he sees them eating the dead. So he leaps into the air, telling the world mind that he's about to engage in a little Terran-based emotional response called payback. But he's so weak that they throw him aside. The bugs jump on him to begin devouring him as well, so the world mind engages Richard's flight functions and takes over his suit, bringing him to the world mind itself. He arrives and he removes his helmet, staring at the collective consciousness of Xandar. And he asks, "Alright, I'll bite. What's next?" And the world mind explains, "I'm going to download myself into your head, Richard." Richard argues that, no one person can hold that power. Each Nova Corps member has a small fraction of that power, and it turns us into rockets. But the world mind insists. So Richard reminds it that Garthan Saul, the guy who did this, it drove him insane. And the world mind tells him, "Well, you are correct. This situation is different. You'll be carrying the consciousness of the world mind, and I will assist you. Plus, I will adjust your suit to carry this burden. Lastly, you will only be carrying me to my next location, so it won't hurt you too much." Richard puts his helmet back on, and he lets the world mind download itself into him. Richard then feels it. He feels the power! It's so much that the Nova Corps force is literally rolling out of him and onto the ground. So he tells the world mind, "Get your coat, we're leaving." And then with a horrific grin on his face, he rockets through space, aiming at the bugs still floating over Xandar. The world mind tells him, "We have to leave." But Richard rockets right into the main ship, losing control, taking it out and exploding on himself. He wakes up back on the planet's surface with the world mind telling him, "That was dumb, Richard." And Richard asking him, "Why didn't I die as well? Why did I survive?" And with that, Drax and Cammy arrive to find him sitting there. They introduce themselves, and Drax explains that they need to find a way off of this rock. Richard turns his back on them, telling them that he is a danger to be around. They need to leave. He's too dangerous to be around like this. And Drax counters with a rather good point. "You aren't more dangerous than whatever that is." Point, but still. Drax tries to convince him, and Richard turns his head away from Drax and Cammy to talk to the world mind. Drax finds the fact that Richard is talking to himself a bit odd, but he figures out that he's obviously talking to the master control system. The world mind brings up something, telling Richard that he can't help Drax. He must be Drax the Destroyer, wanted in multiple space systems for the mass destruction of everything, and a man who was out to kill Thanos. Richard turns to him, "Drax, any relation to the Destroyer?" And Drax simply tells him, "No, that's some other guy." And Cammy helps. "Taller guy, much taller. So no history of destroying in your past."
And if there was?
"Just ask it. Come on, follow me." So the last remaining Nova, the Destroyer bent on killing Thanos and a little girl, begin to traverse the destroyed world of Xandar in the snow. And they make their way to the destroyed capital, looking for a way off-world. And why doesn't Richard just fly everyone off as the strongest Nova ever, you ask? Well, he's afraid of losing control again, so it may be safer for everyone to board a ship and fly off the planet together. As they enter what remains of the ground spaceport, though, they quickly come up on some of the remaining ground wave troops, and Drax leaps in with his knives, telling Richard to get Cammy out of here. Richard and Cammy run through the tunnels, but Drax isn't enough to stop all of the bugs, and they chase after the two Earthlings, and Richard is afraid of using his power. They get boxed in until Drax runs up behind them, demanding to know why you didn't blast them, Nova. Nova doesn't give him an answer, so Drax persists, demanding to know what's going on. Richard hands him the helmet, so Drax slips it on.
"Hello? No, this is Drax. Because I'm wearing his hat. Because he gave it to me."
And then he begins to walk off, talking to the world mind. "No, really, I'm not that Drax. No, I never lie. With whom am I speaking?" Richard sits with Cammy, explaining how he was given his powers and how he is now the last of the Novas, a galaxy-wide peacekeeping force. And Drax comes back over, handing Richard his helmet.
"The world mind explained your situation, so I'm going to show you how to focus that rage and power into something useful."
"You could do that?"
"I have destroyed a lot in my time. It takes a lot of focus and self-control."
"But you're not a destroyer per se."
"Perish the thought."
So the trio heads off to the last ship that they're able to find and they load up. Except that the Nova ships require the Nova Force to power them up. They lift off of the planet and they begin to head over to the Stargate, and as they get to the outer reaches of space, they see it. And Drax tells Richard to focus his Nova energies and open that gate. Richard tells him that he's scared, but Drax tells him, "Just start." So Richard begins to let the Nova Force overflow out of him, and there's spikes of power beginning to spark all over the place, and he turns to Drax. "I'm losing control, Drax. What do I do?"
"You don't lose control."
"And what if I do?"
"Then I kill you."
"This is how you're gonna help me?"
"Yeah. Is it working?"
And in a giant whoosh, the ship departs through the Stargate. But the damage was so massive that as they approach the next planet, the ship begins to crash into it until they're stopped. In front of the ship, holding it steady, is Quasar. Richard looks at him surprised to see his friend, and Cammy says what we're all thinking. "You know, I didn't think it was possible, but he's even cornier looking than you, Nova." So he brings them down to the surface where he welcomes them to the planet. It's currently being evacuated from the Annihilation wave on its way. And Quasar is ensuring that the fleeing inhabitants don't crash into each other or cause other issues. Nova explains how bad the situation is with the loss of Xandar and the entire Nova Corps. And Quasar asks the big question. Should we signal the Avengers or the Imperial Guard? Drax tells him the truth though. Signal the Skrulls for all I care. The universe hasn't seen something like this in 1 billion years. There's nothing that we can do to survive it. He then spills the beans that Richard is holding back something. He has the world mind inside of him and in the entirety of the Nova Force. He then tells them, we need to get ready for a fight. And Nova needs to stop being in denial of his power. But none of this matters as the Annihilation wave approaches fast, and Quasar tells him, if you have the entirety of the Nova Force inside of you, then you're gonna have to use it to save these people. You can use the powers that you have to open up the Stargate so that it can hold everyone and they can all leave. That's when they hear the alarms and the heroes get ready. Drax sits with his gun prepared to protect Cammy, and Quasar lifts off into space. He calls out, Nova! Are you coming, Nova? Richard stands there looking at Drax. I know. Get my head in the game or die. And the world mind calls out to him, but it's too late. Richard Rider is rocketing into space to what could be his death. In the beauty of space, Quasar is firing his beams at anything that moves as Nova arrives blasting through the ships. Nova asks what he should do and Quasar tells him, charge up the Stargate. I'll hold back these advanced units. Richard flies over to it, charging up the gravimetric power until it converges on him, and even the World Mind offers to help control it. Together, they cause a massive spike in power directed at the Stargate, and everyone that is trying to flee the planet is able to go through at once. But that amount of power being spiked out did something else. It alerted Annihilus to the great power nearby, and Annihilus is the leader of the Annihilation wave. As everyone is leaving one at a time, Nova flies back over to Quasar asking what they should do next, and he tells him that they need to stall long enough for everyone to escape. But at that moment, the situation gets worse as the wave commits suicide, crashing their ships into Nova and Quasar. As they both recover, Richard decides that it's time to take this into a full frontal assault. Quasar calls out to him to stop, but Richard isn't stopping. He has what, 10 minutes to stall? Why not make it the bravest 10 minutes, the best 10 minutes, the most epic 10 minutes of Richard Rider's life? He begins opening fire with the full power of the Nova Force, dropping ships everywhere as he sees them, and then he rockets as the human rocket through them. Most of the time, he curls back on himself, finishing off the ships with more Nova blasts. But it's still too much for him. Even with the whole Nova Force at his disposal, Richard can't do it. He's getting bombarded. But guess what? Quasar isn't a pushover either. This is the guy with the Quasar bands, and his power is immense. He follows up, taking out the ship that was bombarding Richard, and he asks him, are you insane? And Richard tells him, no, but we gotta stall, and that's all that matters. Live or die, those refugees are depending on us. Can we do it, Quasar? Now you ask me? Of course we can. Have you seen us? I have the quantum bands and you have the Nova Force. We can make this the hardest 10 minutes they've ever known. As the two of them get ready to end their lives with this assault, Drax calls up telling them, Annihilus is here, guys, the leader of the wave. Nova asks who that is, and Drax tells him, I don't have time to give you the resume, but just trust me, he didn't get his name for quilting souls. You guys need to get a headshot. Remove the head of the wave. Squish the king bug. Why don't you come up here and try it out with us? I would if I could fly. Maybe some will land. I got those. Then Drax loses a signal and it's up to Nova and Quasar. Seeing the capital ship, they decide to take Drax's advice and they charge right for the cockpit of it. As they approach with fires burning around them, Nova tells Quasar, all right, let's land and let me do the talking. But he quickly rethinks that. Never mind, just smoke him! As they crash through the glass. Richard gets ready to blast him and Annihilus swats him away into Quasar, throwing them both back into the corner of the throne room. Quasar gets up and he sees Richard unconscious. So he holds up the quantum bands, charging up his power, ready to blast Annihilus. Except Annihilus reaches through the charging power. Give me your power! I wish to feast on it! Quasar realizes that this isn't right. This isn't normal. Give you my power? What are you talking about? Annihilus grabs the bands, holding them up, sucking them dry. What are you doing? I won't let you take my power! You don't get to choose! And with that, in one move, Annihilus disintegrates Quasar. The Bug King then turns to where Nova lie, ready to take the Nova Force. But then he sees Richard is missing, and Richard uppercuts him with the full power of a man with nothing left. He begins to bombard Annihilus, and the World Mind taps in once again. Attention, Richard. It is critical that we flee. You cannot win this. He outclasses you in every way. I know! He will take the Nova Force. I know! This will result in your death. This will result in my death. Therefore, it's critical that we withdraw from combat. Shut up and look in my head! Look at what I'm thinking! Ah, Right, just get ready to try that. Annihilus reaches out, grabbing Richard, and as the Nova Force begins to get sucked out of him, he begins to feel his life force draining. The World Mind enacts the plan, and he redirects the entire Annihilation wave onto itself using Annihilus's psychic link. Annihilus lets go of him, trying to figure out what just happened, and Richard sees that Annihilus is finally confused. I have him on the ropes! Let's finish him, World Mind! No, Richard, you can't. Alright. You might be right this time. And he uses the full power that he has left at his disposal to withdraw as fast as he can, until he passes out in space. Drax and Cammy find Richard floating out there and they pick him up. As Richard explained what happened, Drax told him that Annihilus did withdraw, but he will be back with far more bugs ready to finish what he started. They've only given themselves time to prepare. So Richard asks Drax, "Can you teach me to destroy?" And that concludes the Nova chapter of Annihilation. Now, there are a lot of side chapters that go into this whole thing, and they all do play an important part to the Annihilation storyline, but we are just gonna go to Annihilation next. I chose to do Nova because a lot more important stuff happened here than, say, the Ronin or the Super Squirrel or the Silver Surfer tie-ins. But we will explain what you missed while doing the main Annihilation storyline. Once that's complete, we'll then do the two tie-ins that happen afterwards, which is the Birth of the Guardians of the Galaxy and Annihilation Conquest, where, you know, everyone fights Ultron. It's gonna be interesting. But that's only gonna happen if you guys enjoy this video, so give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel to let us know that you want to see the epic known as Annihilation from beginning to complete end right here at Comicstorian. And you can follow me on Twitter at Comicstorian, where we can talk about your favorite stories. I'll see you next time right here.